Well, thank you, and I appreciate being invited before the committee. In the next month, we'll release the 2013 Parks Report, where we have done an in-depth study on many of our parks, the problems they have, the financing of our parks, where the money goes, and following it all the way down, and list in there some recommendations of things we hope the committee will consider. But I appreciate the opportunity to come before you. My background, I was born in Wyoming. I love Yellowstone. I love Rocky Mountain National Park. I love the Grand Tetons. I spend a lot of time in that part of the country when I'm not here, and so I'm a critic of what we're doing because I love our parks. My oldest 4 grandkids just spent time at the Grand Canyon and at Yellowstone, enjoying and taking in those magnificent parks. You know, the National Park Service has a $3 billion, a little bit less than $3 billion budget, and 401 units, park units, covering 84 million acres of land. But with that budget, they also are responsible for 27,000 historic structures, 2,461 National Historic Landmarks, 582 natural landmarks, 49 national heritage areas, and 84 million acres of land. The budget for the parks themselves is only $1.36 billion. The remaining annual funds of their budget goes towards a multitude of activities, including affiliated areas, grant programs, research centers, administrative expenses, and additional land acquisition. Congress and multiple administrations have recognized the deferred maintenance problem for years. Matter of fact, President Bush gave a speech in 2001 and said under his administration we were going to correct that. And they did 1 year. If you look at the graph over here, the deferred maintenance went down 1 year and then it has continued to climb ever since. And I would make the point, and I think most common sense Americans would make the point, before we add additional parks, we ought to be taking care of the parks we have. And we ought to prioritize what our jewels are. I mean, we all know. I mean, Alaska has wonderful jewels. Oregon has, Colorado, Smoky Mountains. We have wonderful jewels, but we ought to take care of them. And the political process to add a park is driven, 1, by recognition, 2, by commerce, because there's always the hope that commerce will follow a park. But I think mature thinking would have us really look at the priorities of what we have today and want to invest and keep what we have today before we make commitments to lessen what we have today. A 1997 National Park Service report based on identified maintenance, rehabilitation, developmental needs. The National Park Service does not have and never has had enough funds and staff to care for all the resources in its custody. Yet we keep adding things for them to do. Contributing to the fundamental problem are unrealistic expectations reflected in and furthered by park planning documents, an overwhelming deferred maintenance workload, and a lack of multidisciplinary focus to set and achieve realistic goals in cooperative efforts, recognizing the value of the aspects of separate parks. Since 1997, we've had 26 park units. Since 1997. In April 2013, the present administration said the following: because of the age of existing MPS assets, the capital construction backlog of the service continues to rapidly expand beyond the capabilities of the service to keep up with known major repair or rehabilitation needs. Within the same month of reconfirming that the Park Service doesn't have the resources to take care of what it has, they added 3 new parks and 13,000 acres. Through the Antiquities Act. Not through us, but through the Antiquities Act. So we're going to make this graph much worse just on what's been done in the last year. The line item construction budget for the National Park Service was $77 million. That's the lowest level since 1988 in 25 years, last year, as we climb, but their construction budget was at the lowest level in 25 years. Deferred maintenance is 5 times more costly than routine preventative maintenance. And we know that. The Park Service can give us that. We know that's true in other areas. And yet when we don't have the resources to actually resurface a road, then what happens is we have to rebuild the base on the road. The cost is astronomical. So all these things are multipliers that are actually hurting this number, actually making it grow higher as we pass on cheaper maintenance that actually would preserve and then have to go to full replacement. The top 10 most visited park units in 2012 had deferred maintenance backlog of $2.6 billion. So 20% of the deferred maintenance backlog is in our top 10 most visited parks. In 2012, the 59 national parks representing the crown jewels hosted 65 million visitors, and they have, those jewels have $5 billion of that maintenance. I can give you some significant examples of deferred maintenance. You'll probably hear that from the director, but I'll just give you one example. At Independence National Historic Park in Philadelphia, over the last 5 years, tripping hazards in the park have resulted in 15 tort claims filed, with claims up to $2 million a year paid out. What I would tell you is that had we spent a fourth of that each year on maintenance, none of that would have happened. So it's not just the deferred maintenance, is we're spending money in other areas on lawsuits because of deferred maintenance. And I appreciate what Senator Murkowski said. I think the LWCF fund ought to be reallocated. It's going to continue to grow as our oil and gas offshore continues to grow. Those funds are going to increase. And I know we're in competition with other desires for land acquisition, but it seems to me that if we were to take 75% of that fund by changing the requirements of that fund and put it into park maintenance over the next 10 years to get us caught back up, that in fact we could meet the obligations that are really expected of the American people without doing anything else and actually get caught back up to a place where we're really protecting these national treasures that we have. The other point I would make is that over the last decade, Congress has appropriated over $500 million to acquire even more land, while the same period, the cost of the NPS lands has doubled of just maintaining the National Park Service's situation. Why don't I stop there and I'll answer any question you have. I'd make one final point. Of the top 25 most visited national parks in 2011, only 8 have been approved since 1970. In comparison, of the 25 least visited national parks, 20 have been established since 1970. So the priority, not only the fact that we're establishing new parks when we don't have the money to do so, but the priority of what we're establishing in terms of exposure to the American public and visitation is very, very low. So what we're doing is sacrificing our desire for new parks by putting at risk the crown jewels of our national park system. With that, I'd stop and take any questions that you have.